Snow White has been an iconic part of history as it was the first ever Disney movie to be released in 1937. With the upcoming remake of Snow White coming out on March of 2025, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the 1960s live action version of Snow White. And believe me, it is quite a treat, but things do get weird. Do not forget to subscribe and at least flirt with that like button before hitting it. Thank you for watching and enjoy. At the start of the movie, everything seems true to the original. The film opens up with a typical widespan camera shot of a castle. We then get a glance at the 60s version of Snow White. While the actress does fit the physical description of the Snow White we are used to seeing, her hair choices are a bit different. She sports pigtails, her hair is long, almost down to her waist, unlike her usual short hair, and she does not wear the typical blue and red dress we have seen throughout the years. We also get to see the evil queen standing in front of her magic mirror, reciting her famous line, "Who is the fairest one of all?" The mirror tells her basically, "Not you, girl, bye," and she then learns that Snow White is the fairest lady in the land, and the evil queen decides to get rid of Snow White. The huntsman immediately warns Snow White of the queen's malicious plan and tells her that she must leave right away, where he then chases her off into the woods. Snow White then comes across a house conveniently placed in the middle of the woods where she finds 7 tiny little beds and 7 tiny little shoes. Everything is still true to the original, but this is where things do get weird. After Snow White basically breaks into the home, we get a first look at the dwarves, and I was a little shocked to see that these are not little people or small men, but instead they are just little kids wearing beards. They also do not try to disguise their voices in any way either, they just use their regular little kid voices, which is slightly off putting. Snow White and the 7 dwarfs all get along, they sing together, they dance together, and they have way too much fun cleaning together. During the day, Snow White is left at home alone while the dwarves leave to go to work. In the original, the dwarves work as little miniature miner men in search of gemstones, but seeing that we have 7 little kids here who cannot legally work, but they must be working overtime because they do not return until nightfall, and I have questions. Anyways, these 7 little kids leave one morning, and this is when Snow White gets a visit from the evil queen. The queen is supposed to have some kind of disguise on for the visit, that way Snow White doesn't recognize her, but in this movie, she just throws a scarf over her head and calls it a day. In the original, the evil queen visits Snow White one time where she then gives her a poison apple. In this version, the queen visits Snow White not one, not two, but 3 times in total. This is because each time she visits Snow White, her attempts to get rid of her keep failing. The first time she visits Snow White, she knocks at the door with a basket of accessories. Snow White instantly becomes interested and picks out a belt, as in a waist belt. Snow White invites her into the home so she can try it on. The queen offers to help Snow White tighten the belt so it will fit better, but then pulls the belt so tight that Snow White passes out and falls to the floor. The little bearded children come home and find Snow White. Luckily, she does survive the ordeal. The queen comes back for a second time. This time, she offers Snow White a comb, as in a hair comb. For some reason, Snow White did not learn anything from the first time and she accepts the comb. The queen places the comb into Snow White's hair. The problem is that the comb is laced with poison, and Snow White again falls to the floor. Luckily, for the second time, Snow White is alive and well. For the third and final visit, the queen concocts a bigger plan and comes armed with the classic poison apple. This time, Snow White is a little weary and refuses to accept anything. The queen then guilts her and tells her a sob story about how she's elderly and has traveled all day on foot and now has wasted her whole day. Snow White falls for it because she feels bad, so she picks up the apple, takes a bite, and once again falls to the floor. All 3 times that Snow White has been tricked by the evil queen, the dwarfs found her each time and somehow nursed her back to health. But this time, Snow White was
There's
not
no
waking
comb in
up.
her
The
hair.
dwarves wait an alarmingly short
Now
amount of
very
time
well.
before deciding that
Now
Snow White
on
is
to
gone
what
for good, and they place her into a glass coffin and get her the heck out of there. As all 7 dwarves are carrying her coffin into the woods, this little cutie shows up and out of nowhere says he's a prince. He then, for some reason, suggests this.
I'll take Snow White back to my palace, and I'll honor and cherish her.
The dwarves agree because why wouldn't you pass her along to a stranger? And they all travel the journey up to his castle. While on foot, one of the dwarves happens to trip on a rock, causing the coffin to fall to the floor. The others start verbally attacking him before they realize that the fall made Snow White wake up and she is alive once again. So there was no magical kiss that brought Snow White back to life in this film, which was probably a good thing since in this film, she had never met the prince in the first place, and that would be creepy. I was, however, taken back at the dwarves' reaction when they realized Snow White was still alive. They really didn't seem very happy or surprised at all. However, when the prince decides to randomly propose to Snow White and she says yes, the dwarves all seem strangely ecstatic and are jumping for joy. Where was all this energy when you found out she was still alive? Maybe they are just really excited she's moving out and they no longer have to deal with an injured woman every time they come home. That brings us to the end of the story. Snow White and the prince she just met get married with the bearded children in attendance, of course, and as the saying goes, they all lived happily ever after. I don't know how the new 2025 Snow White is going to measure up to this masterpiece, but I will be watching regardless. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Ciao.